How we doing, Jets fans? I'm Glenn Naughton with JetNation Radio and JetNation.com. Be sure to log in to JetNation.com where you can register and become a part of what is the most active Jets support on the web. We're going to get this one rolling right away. Myself and Chris Schubert, who has just jumped in here. Chris, how we doing
Glenn,
today?
how are you today, my friend? What's going on?
Doing well, doing well. No pre-show today. Jumped right into it. So I figured you'd be here shortly. I know we got a hard out, so
Yeah.
we we're going to break down Joe Douglas, a very polarizing figure in the land of the New York Jets. But before we kick things off, Chris, with Joe Douglas, I did want to get your thoughts. I went live earlier
Yeah,
to
what was
talk
that
about
about? It's
the
it's a Wednesday. You and I do a show together on Wednesday, and I see you went live earlier without me. I didn't the link didn't get dropped in my DMs or anything. I was like, what's going on?
yeah, like if I don't know if you saw it, if you go back and watch it, I'm at the tail end of it, and I'm like, check me and Chris Schubert out. We're on tomorrow night. Is that tonight? That wait, that is today Tuesday? I completely forgot what day it was, but the story was all over my timeline. I thought it's Tuesday. I'm going to get this now while it's hot. But I want your thoughts. Of course, Taylor Lewin sends out a tweet saying how much he enjoyed playing in Tennessee, except when Keith Carter was his O-line coach. Brees Hall gives it 1,000 laughing emojis, laughing in the face of the O-line coach. And Mekhi Becton, who may or may not be back, agrees with the section of Lewin's tweet or Instagram post, whatever it was, that says, I liked playing there except when Keith Carter was my coach.
Yeah, I mean, is this a surprise to everybody that Keith Carter's not well liked? There was a celebration in Tennessee when he got fired last year before he came to the New York Jets. It was a celebration in Tennessee that he was no longer going to be coaching the offensive line because of how well known it was there that he didn't do a good job. The players didn't respond well to the way that he chose to coach. So that was the backdrop going into the 2023 campaign that saw 4 plays in, their quarterback get hurt, potentially because of the way the offensive line is instructed to do certain things on certain plays. And then you hear all throughout the course of the season the unhappiness of these offensive linemen with Keith Carter. You see the poor offensive line play, but don't worry, Glenn. Keith Carter is a guy that Robert Saleh pounded the table for. Got to have this guy on our coaching staff. So we are not going to make any changes to our coaching staff for the 2024 campaign. And this guy is back. And while he's back, after the public declaration he's going to be back, after all the beat writers who cover this team say, nope, don't expect any major changes to this coaching staff. Keith Carter, Todd Downing, Nathaniel Hackett, all these coaches, they're coming back. We're just going to redo it in 2024. You then have players, including players who are still on the team, saying that they don't want to be coached by this guy. I will once again point to my previous statements about the failure and lack of leadership that Robert Saleh exudes on a regular basis as the head coach, CEO of this team. As the coach, you're the CEO. You oversee everything from a football perspective, coaches, players, everything. He has failed in every regard in that capacity. And I'll say this up front, Glenn. If Keith Carter stays on this coaching staff after this latest thing that has occurred, the New York Jets are a sinking ship, and I want nothing to do with them. I'm not picking them to do anything in 2024. I'm not doing it. They are poorly coached across the board, and leaving a guy like Keith Carter in place, to me, is unacceptable.
Yeah, I think that really turns up the heat on Robert Saleh. But we know these guys have egos. We know that's one of his guys. And it's listen, I said earlier, it to me, in a perfect world, if I owned the team, I would wish not a single player had a social media account because it only leads to stuff like this. But it's out there now. It is what it is. I guess Becton deleted the tweet, but why do guys do that? Like, it's going to get seen. The first person that sees it is going to screenshot it. And then
Right.
someone calls you, whether it's a coach or a teammate or an agent, and says, hey, man, take that down. And it doesn't matter. It's out there in the universe forever. And look, maybe Becton has decided he's moving on. I don't know. I think it's a bad look. Very bad look for the team. Very bad look for Robert Saleh. I think Saleh might fall back on the fact that, you know what? The season just ended. By the time OTAs and all that stuff rolls around, everybody will have forgotten about it, or at least it'll be far enough in the rearview mirror that it won't be an issue. So we'll see. I would love to see a move, but I just don't see it happening. Go ahead. Oh, I thought you were going to say something.
Because you mentioned, egos involved with this. If you're Robert Saleh, if you're Joe Douglas, you got to check your ego at the door right now. Do I need to bring up the records that you two have in your respective positions for the New York
Yep.
Jets? Egos have to go out the window. You need to put together a competent team, a competent staff, a competent organization that's going to make the playoffs and make a deep run in the AFC playoffs. Glenn, I know we talked about this last summer, and I'm going to go all over the place, but I think everyone listening to the show is going to understand my point here. Everybody talked about, expectations. Yeah, the Jets are really good with Aaron Rodgers and this great defense and all this talent. They should be in the mix in the AFC, but just breaking the playoff streak should be good enough. Well, guess what, Glenn? After what happened in 2023 and the limited runway that you have with Aaron Rodgers, just making the playoffs, potentially being one and done, or just winning one playoff game, that's not enough. This team has to be playing in an AFC championship game at the worst next season for this to be considered a success, what they have decided to do here. And so if we're going to allow our coaching egos to get in the way of us putting together a competent staff, a competent roster, a competent organization that can achieve that goal, then they're going to fail at this mandate that they're going to have going into next season. They're going to completely fail
it. I mean, we don't know what his vision is and what constitutes doing a good enough job to return, but hopefully we find out, man. Hopefully there's a playoff game or two and we see what happens from there. But as of this season and what we just witnessed, a lot of it, of course, ties into the moves that are made in the offseason. So we're going to break down Joe Douglas and his offseason and how everything played out. And really, to me, it was just about as catastrophic as it could get. Almost every, not almost, but a lot of the main guys, of course, Aaron, the injury. But we'll start with the draft because that, of course, everyone loves talking draft. And a lot of people, I recall, Chris, of course you recall, we took a little heat from Jets fans because we said we didn't like the draft. We didn't say, well, I was more open to I liked the players, several of them, but we both were in lockstep on the philosophy. Like, what are you doing? You just drafted a bunch of guys who aren't going to play, with the exception of Joe Tippmann. And at the time, we thought, well, and Izzy Abanikanda, but then you bring Dalvin Cook in, and there goes Izzy. So you really put yourself in a spot where Will McDonald, I said when he was drafted, I thought, someone said, give us a number, Glenn. What percentage of snaps is Will McDonald going to play in? And I thought, let's go low here to, there was a low number for Jermaine Johnson. I said 25%. Oh, you're crazy. He's going to play more than that. And I thought, yeah, he probably will. He didn't. He didn't even play 25% of the snaps. Your first round pick. Joe Tippmann, of course, played a ton, which we knew, we all said within a matter of a few weeks he would take a starting job.
We said it on draft night.
What's that?
We said on draft night that's your starting center by the midway point of the season.
Yeah, exactly.
On draft night, we forecasted exactly what was going to happen with Tippmann. Sorry to interrupt. I just thought that was a point that was worth mentioning.
Carter Warren, 4 or 5 starts down the stretch. Izzy Abanikanda, some garbage time carries late in the season. Zaire Barnes did not see the field. Jarek Bernard-Converse played a couple of reps in garbage time. Zach Kuntz wasn't even active until the final game of the season, where he didn't play. May have had some special teams reps. I'm not sure. But I don't know. I'm not saying this class won't be good moving forward. I'm not saying, 2 or 3 of these guys may not be contributors next year. But for this being a short window, and they're supposed to be building a team for Aaron Rodgers to succeed over a 1 to 2 year period, the picks made no sense then. I don't know how you give it anything other than an F from that standpoint. Like I said, I completely get 2 or 3 years from now, we might be saying it's a pretty damn good class. We have a stud pass rusher. We have a game-breaking running back. We have a starting, even spot starter, backup tackle in Carter. I don't expect a whole lot from Barnes. And we don't have to talk again about how that should have been Ivan Pace. And JBC and Kuntz, I don't really know what to expect from those guys. Major projects, especially, Kuntz really is the major project of the group. But that's the draft, of course, and let's of course give some credit. Xavier Gipson had some moments, got better down the stretch. Not just the UDFA, but the UDFA had a really small program, so he was going to take some time. Wasn't perfect, far from it, but contributed. Brownlee and Gibson, of course, were better than almost all the day 3 picks, all of them. But that's the class with the UDFAs. What are your thoughts? To me, that it's a loss for Joe Douglas. The approach was terrible.
Yeah, it's an F because the process was completely flawed. The results might be good because you got Will McDonald and you think you can build around him. The results might be good because you think you got your starting center in round 2, but the process was completely flawed across the board. We said it the night the pick was made that the process was flawed. But here, Glenn, is where I want to take this. I did not clear this with you before the show started. So I'm going to take a left turn here in line with the draft, and I want to know what your thoughts are on this. Joe Douglas, whatever you think of him, and we thought the process was bad, this has been his process his entire tenure in New York as the GM. He didn't just wake up for the 2023 NFL draft and decide this is my new philosophy for how I draft. This is what he's done his entire tenure with the New York Jets. He's got his big board, and the players that are on that big board, he's going to take them best player available. Now, sometimes it lines up where you have a Sauce Gardner at number 4. Okay, great. We could take him. He fits a need, no problem. He's going to play right away. We have a need at wide receiver. We're going to take Garrett Wilson. But remember, right after that draft, it came out that they had a top 3 grade on Sauce. They had a top 8 grade on Garrett Wilson, and Jermaine Johnson, they had a top 8 grade on as well. They had all 3 of those guys who they got in the first round. They had top 8 grades on those guys. So they followed their board specifically. Need aside, that they trust the board. Well, then they did that again with the Will McDonald pick. So that is the way Joe Douglas chooses to draft. And he's heard about it for months, about how terrible that process was. What scares me to death, Glenn, is in a year where there's a mandate to be successful, in a year where there's a mandate to put together a team that can compete in the AFC and make a run in the playoffs, my biggest fear, the thing that keeps me up at night, I wake up in cold sweats thinking about this, is Joe Douglas going to allow that outside noise and the fact that the 2023 class didn't really pan out and have immediate impact? Is he going to pivot and be a all-in, I got to take players that help me right now? Because the pushback that I would say to you, Glenn, is that scares me. A GM completely changing their philosophy in a mandate season. Because I don't know what Joe Douglas looks like when he has to pick players to fill immediate needs. I don't know what that looks like. I've only seen the Joe Douglas that follows a specific process. I thought the process was flawed in 2023, but at least he has a process that has been his identity so far. If he's going to change his identity in a must-have-it season, that should scare Jets fans, because I don't know what that evaluator looks like. I don't know what those selections look like. Do they take the wrong offensive tackle prospect? Do they take the wrong wide receiver prospect? And if they do, because they lean into the needs that they have, it could be a disaster. So this is the bet they made by choosing to go that way in 2023. And so I don't feel bad for them. They've got to dig themselves out of this mess that they created. And Joe Douglas has put his hand up and said, I'm responsible for this. Well, okay, Joe, you've got a limited amount of resources in terms of cap space. Good luck with that. Restructure whatever contracts you can. You've got a limited amount of resources in terms of draft capital. You don't have a second round pick. So you got to figure it out with a team that's got a lot of needs. They are not the team that we thought they were going into 2023.
Exactly. And this is the thing. I think I think anybody who has been doing something a certain way, if you're told, look, you've got one more shot to do something special or you're fired, you can't afford to say, well, we're going to take this guy who we think is going to be really good in a couple of years. Like, you don't have that option. Charles nails it in the chat. He says if Bowers is there, you have to pick him. Charles is 100% right.
Can I push back just real quick? This is not specific to Brock Bowers. The New York Jets are not in a position with their roster where the statement should be, if insert player is there, you have to pick him. The Jets have multiple needs in multiple positions. So there is no, if this player's there, he's got to be the pick. Because I'll give you 3 other players at 3 different positions that this team needs that they should get. Is Brock Bowers a good player? Absolutely. Is Brock Bowers a player that would help the New York Jets? Absolutely. Does Brock Bowers fit a need that the New York Jets have in terms of needing more pass catchers? Absolutely. Not disagreeing with any of that. But the New York Jets are not in a position where it is Vontae Mack, no matter what. This is not the movie Draft Day. Okay, it's not Brock Bowers no matter what. There are multiple players at multiple different positions that this team should be looking at when they make their selection at number 10.
Yeah, and we'll see if Bowers even. I think Bowers.
He's not going to get there.
You don't think he'll get to 10?
Nope.
Oh, really? That's kind of I don't know. It's just a mental thing. I've sort of had in my mind like top 12. Like, I think he'll go 10, 11, 12 somewhere in there.
So let me just check, because I don't want to say a team name out loud and they pick behind the Jets, but there's a team that immediately, and yep, they pick directly in front of the New York Jets. You're telling me that Ryan Poles and the Chicago Bears wouldn't feel fantastic about Caleb Williams at number 1 and Brock Bowers at number 9? There you go, Caleb. You got DJ Moore. You got Brock Bowers. We used a first-round pick on the offensive line last year. We'll use some free agency dollars on the offensive line this year. Away we go. Is that not a scenario that could very easily play out in front of our eyes?
Why are you trying to ruin my night? I'm just trying to do a show.
So glad they beat the Commanders.
You got Brock Bowers coming off the board right before the Jets.
They broke the streak to New England. So glad that they dropped all those slots.
I'll tell you what. I know we're here to talk about Joe Douglas, but I cannot. It was like if you didn't know any better, if you slept through the entire season and you went on Twitter the day after that game, you would think the Jets beat the Patriots in the playoffs again. Like I'm seeing memes of like backflips and like the celebrations. I'm like, you think Bill Belichick cares about that game? Like he knows he's moving on. I said during the game, I had people telling me that before the final whistle was done sounding, that dude was moved on. Like, yeah, he's in the moment, he's coaching, he's trying to win. Whistle blow, he doesn't care.
And look,
it hurt his legacy. Oh, we beat Bill. He doesn't care.
Right. It's one of those things where it's nice for the Jets because it no longer is a talking point when they play the New England Patriots. I'm happy in that regard.
That's emotional stuff. I don't care about emotions. Like, what's practical? What's good for the team?
But guess what?
And what would have been good for the team is picking earlier.
You don't feel good about that. You don't feel good about that win. You won a game in the snow where the two quarterbacks were awful. The game itself stunk out loud. Like it doesn't, you didn't beat Tom Brady with the New England Patriots trying to make the playoffs in the final game. And that's the way you send Bill.
I'm reading these tweets. You didn't do that. I'm like, did they win the division? What's going on here?
You might have cost yourself serious draft position to break a streak in a game that didn't mean anything. Now, listen, I'm no more thrilled than anybody that's how Bill Belichick rides off into the sunset in New England potentially. And I'm happy that I no longer have to hear that the New England Patriots have won 16, 17, whatever the number was, in a row against the New York Jets. There's nobody happier about that than me. But at the same time, there's a cost-benefit analysis that you have to do here. The cost of the benefit of no longer having to talk about that is the Jets failed draft picks. If you trust Joe Douglas to be able to make a good selection at number 10, then it shouldn't be a problem. I'm on the fence right now.
And how about you lose that game and then you beat them in the first time you face them next year, and you end up with the second pick, third. Yeah. Well, it would have been fifth pick, sixth. Anyway, moving right along. So Joe Douglas, we both agree the draft, maybe some good players, but philosophically, terrible job. Should have done more there. So from the draft,
we both gave him an F there, right? Just so for the okay,
yeah,
so 2 Fs
from the draft. We pivot to, of course, the big move of the offseason, the trade for Aaron Rodgers, this saga that dragged out for weeks and weeks and months. Another thing where you and I both agreed, we thought the price for Rodgers was too high, would have preferred keeping all of the draft picks. You would have had your 2 this year. You would have had that 2 that you gave up for Moore last year.
You probably have Broderick Jones playing left tackle for you too.
Yeah, exactly. And but instead, you gave up the picks. You gave up the money. You brought in Aaron Rodgers. What the future holds, we don't know. But right now, we know the Jets gave up a second-round pick for 4 snaps. And for anyone that listened to this show, one of the reasons myself and Chris were critical of the idea of bringing Rodgers in and the price tag was kind of like, this guy's not young. Like, here's an injury risk. And he literally was injured the previous year. And now all of a sudden we're pretending, that there were no worries in bringing this guy in. He doesn't last a drive. And again, that the injury itself isn't Joe Douglas's fault. What bothers me, Chris, is the people who were heaping praise on Joe Douglas for getting protection. That if Rodgers got hurt, it wouldn't be a 1. It's still a 2, which is a lot for a guy who didn't play, no? Like, protection would have been, have some thresholds. Like, all right, if he plays 50% of the snaps, you get this. If he plays 25%, you get that. If he plays less than 25, we'll talk about a pick the following year. You don't get anything. Something like that. Not, oh, thank God we gave up a 2 for those 4 snaps. I can't get, that's another thing I can't get my head around.
So I know that the listeners of this show, the viewers of this show, there are some out there. I'm a very divisive figure among the community. There are some that cheer me on when I go on these long-winded rants here on the show. And there are some that think what I say is ridiculous and I should shove it and not be on this show. I get it. I understand. We're allowed to view this trade with the benefit of hindsight. That's what we're doing. We're reviewing this.
Yeah.
I was pretty critical at the time about this being the direction that the franchise went in. And Glenn, you can vouch for that both on this show and behind the scenes. This is not the direction I wanted this team to go. So I feel pretty comfortable doing this right now and being the guy that has this take in the offseason. This gets an F. And here's why this gets an F. Because the New York Jets, I'm not so sure, are better off with a 41-year-old Aaron Rodgers coming off of an Achilles in 2024 than they would be if they had Derek Carr or Jimmy Garoppolo. I'm not sure. For those out there, there's a lot of people in the media that say, "Oh, this is the bed that the Jets made. They have to lay in it. This is their only path forward. They've got to stick with Aaron Rodgers." No, they don't. And this is why making this decision when they did was so bad, because they shortened a runway that didn't need to be shortened. They just needed to get the plane on the taxiway. That was what needed to be done going from 2022 to 2023. Get the plane onto the taxiway. What the New York Jets did was they put the plane on the taxiway and said, you've got 50 feet to take the plane off. That's what they did by trading for Aaron Rodgers. And while Aaron Rodgers could have made 2023 something, he didn't. And so now they go into 2024 without a second-round pick, with a about to be 41-year-old quarterback coming off of an Achilles injury, who is coming off of a year in which he had a thumb injury that saw his numbers go down, with a team that has so many needs, we would need 3 shows to discuss them in depth enough to be able to be competitive in 2024. This gets an F. This absolutely gets an F, because they did not have to go this direction, and they did, and they put themselves in an unwinnable situation for 2024.
Yeah, it was, and like I said, I remember at the time being really surprised at how few people were concerned about the age and the injury risk. I mean, everybody was so wrapped up in, like, he's a Hall of Famer. Like, yeah, I get that, and that's great, and he might win. He might do something special here, and this trade will look great if they win a Super Bowl in the next year or two. But just looking at it for what it is now, you gave up a lot. You didn't truly protect yourself against an injury.
I'm sorry. Can I jump back in? There was something I forgot in that entire rant. Also, because this was the path you chose to go down, Woody Johnson had to commit to another year of Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh. That could set it could set the franchise back even further. It could. I'm not saying it will. I'm out on Saleh. I've said it on the show. I've said it to you behind the scenes, Glenn. I'm out. I don't think he's a good coach. I think he's going to cost this team important games next season. I think people are going to lose their minds when it actually matters, and he's costing them games with Rodgers. I'm out. And so because you've decided to go down this Aaron Rodgers route, you have forced yourself to run it back with this bad coaching staff, with the bad process of this front office organization, and all of these needs going into 2024. I hate to be the guy that says the glass is half empty, but I just can't get there. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. I saw this coaching staff. Aaron Rodgers doesn't fix the poor output that this coaching staff gave us in 2023. It doesn't. It doesn't change that this team is a bottom half, bottom third of the league in terms of coaching, and coaching matters. You don't think coaching matters? Cleveland's in the playoffs with 11 wins. You don't think coaching matters? Look at DeMeco Ryans in Houston. You don't think coaching matters? Look at Sean McVay. Coaching matters. Mike Tomlin is dragged the Steelers to the playoffs starting 3 quarterbacks. Don't tell me that Aaron Rodgers fix all this. He doesn't. This team is poorly coached. That's not going to change. They've already made that determination.
And
so
I say all the time, we spend a million hours talking about this team because we love it, and I love watching, and I love talking, and I love the interaction with the fans. But I always try to remind myself, and I mention it every now and then, we don't know what's happening behind the scenes. We don't, like, when I see stuff like this is where I wonder how involved. There was the report coming out of the combine that Woody Johnson was there and he nixed the Derek Carr thing. Like, Woody was like, we're not making a move until the Aaron Rodgers dust settles. So no, don't sign Derek Carr. Like, that was the story out of the combine. And believable. Look, I don't fault Woody for that, in the sense that, when I hear people say, don't meddle. If you own the team, you wouldn't be stepping in with stuff like this. Like, some of the biggest moves you're ever going to make, you're not going to, whether you're right or wrong is irrelevant. But I guess I'm just looking at it. I sure as hell wouldn't sit there and do nothing. I'd be like, hey, here's what I would prefer. Well, when the owner prefers something, that's what you're doing.
Right.
So we don't know. Some of the biggest things we don't know with this is, A, how much of it was Woody driving the go get Aaron train, and how much, and I discussed this. Would you believe, Chris, I don't know if you saw this earlier, I tweeted about it. I forget. Somebody replied to me. There's actually somebody out there who was arguing with me that there was no list. And Joe Douglas signed all those Aaron Rodgers guys because he wanted them, not because Aaron Rodgers wanted them here.
Okay.
Now,
okay. Hold on. Okay. Then Joe Douglas gets an F in free agency and should be gone.
but that's what, if you believe that. I don't believe
If you
that.
believe that, Joe Douglas should have been told, pack your boxes. You're not good at this.
Yeah.
We're going in a different direction. If you believe that Aaron Rodgers had nothing to do with Randall Cobb, Billy Turner, Alan Lazard, if you think that Aaron Rodgers had nothing to do with that, then what you are saying is Joe Douglas is a terrible general manager.
And what I think happened, Chris, I mean, to me, it's obvious. These are guys Rodgers wanted. And when you look at the fact that Rodgers got hurt and didn't play, and then you had, and I made this point the other day, we hear all the time from, read any X's and O's book by a GM or a coach or a former GM, and they just bang away about like every single roster spot is invaluable. Like the gymnastics on game day of who can we activate because we need an extra gunner, we need an extra this, we need an extra return man, whatever it may be. We hear so much about how one roster spot on game day is critical. Joe Douglas traded for Aaron Rodgers and then signed 5 of his friends. They all stunk, and Rodgers got hurt. Joe Douglas was working with a 47-man roster, basically, this year because of the moves to go get Aaron's guys for Aaron and to get Aaron himself. So, again, without knowing behind the scenes, is Woody saying, hey, Joe, go get Aaron, and when he gets here, you get him everything he wants? And is that why Woody's looking at this and going, you know what? As bad as this was, some of this is on me. Because my GM signed a bunch of bad players that I told him to sign. And he went and got a quarterback that maybe he wouldn't have gone out and gotten if I hadn't said go get him.
And are you saying, we're just having a conversation, are you saying that is the reason why those guys have been given another year? They've been given, it was signed off.
I'm just thinking out loud and saying that could play a role. That could be part of it.
That's fine. But are you now going to change your tune and allow Joe Douglas the opportunity to do what he needs to do? Because you can't do that.
I certainly hope so.
You've invited Aaron Rodgers into the building.
Yeah,
you're now going to all of a sudden shun his opinion?
Yeah, are they going to, or is Bakhtiari going to be the starting tackle week 1?
I have joked behind the scenes with friends that David Bakhtiari and Devontae Adams are coming to the New York Jets, and the Jets are not going to be picking in the first round. I've made the joke that everyone's like, oh, don't worry, they've got a first round pick. Don't worry, David Bakhtiari and Devontae Adams are going to be on this team. Now, Devontae, I'd be okay with.
You can't give up 10 for Devontae. A 31-year-old receiver?
They'll do the pick swap thing again. They'll go from 10 to 14 because I think that's where the Raiders pick. They'll just swap picks and they'll pick at 14 and be great.
All right, free agency.
Oh, this is
Joe
great.
Douglas.
So we've got 2 Fs so far. So this is going well for Joe.
Joe Douglas and free. It's his worst. It's his worst by far. So I'm going off the Jets official website. They tracked free agents. I don't know if they went through the entire free agency period, but most of the important names are on here.
Yeah, that's fine.
So let's see. In-house free agent Quincy Williams. That worked out well.
Okay. And I was not on board, and I've atoned for this. I've apologized to Quincy. Yeah. He was I think, I'll say it, top 3 defensive player for the New York Jets last season.
Oh, absolutely.
Top 3.
I was on board with the signing, but I thought
incredible.
We talked about this. Like
he was incredible this year.
Mental errors, and is he a guy? How much can you rely? You love the splash plays, but you see the mistakes.
Got rid of all the mistakes here. Got rid of all the mistakes and had all the splash plays. It was
one
perfect.
Splash play after another.
It was amazing. He was so good.
Greg Zuerlein.
Oh,
I mean, you got to get that guy re-signed. Do
you find it interesting that they gave Austin Siebert a futures contract with Greg Zuerlein about to be a free agent? I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I saw that, and I was like, wait a minute, what's going on here?
Yeah.
Alan Lazard.
F. So, 2 A's. We gave 2 A's there, and this is an F. This is an F, not because Aaron Rodgers got hurt 4 plays in, and not because they got a guy from Green Bay that Aaron Rodgers liked. It has nothing to do with that. Alan Lazard could never do the things he needed to do that made him successful in Green Bay. Couldn't do it. Had the drops.
Yeah.
Got sat down at one point. Got benched. Wasn't active for games.
Twice.
Okay, that's an F. That's an F. And there's 3 more years on that deal. So that's great.
Yeah. Well, remember Saleh said he's got a year and a half left on that deal. Like they can get out of it after 2. Yeah. I don't think Saleh meant to say that out loud.
Well, he did.
I was in the press. He's like, well, we love Alan. He's here for another year and a half. And I was like, oh, he signed a 4-year deal, Robert. But Robert's like counting down the days. Like, if I'm here, he won't be.
Yeah. Well, who? Okay. All right. Hold on. Quick sidebar. Who is on the Jets longer, Alan Lazard or Robert Saleh?
Oof. I think it's gonna be a tie. I think
Really?
they're both gone after next year.
So I think it's Lazard.
All right. Oh yeah. See, if Aaron's around, maybe so. Maybe so. Solomon Thomas, what, D plus, C minus?
No, hold on. Listen.
Nice guy. Doesn't make a lot of plays. Fills a gap.
The strength of Joe Douglas's free agent class is what he did on the interior of the defensive line. That's where he's going to get a lot of his praise. So I'll be nice here and go C plus, B minus. Because Solomon was a good player, gave them depth when some guys went down, and filled in roles nicely. So we'll be nice to Joe, because I've been mean the rest of the show.
Some of these guys I won't even mention, because even when they're signed, you're like, well, this guy may not make the roster. Like Tristan Colon. Like, nobody.
Yeah, no, we're not. Yeah. You're not getting that level of breakdown.
78 transactions over a 3-month period.
No.
So let's see. A plus, Thomas Morstead.
Oh, can you
that first punt the other day?
A plus?
Like, Jesus.
A plus. He was excellent.
Rolls on, stops at the 2.
He was excellent.
Get that guy re-signed too. We got an F. Mecole Hardman.
Oh my God! Can I go lower than an F? He didn't make it through the season.
Mecole Hardman. Again, I said a minute ago that I try to remind myself of things like this. I always try to remind myself there's stuff that goes on behind the scenes that we don't know about. Something happened. I don't know what. You don't sign a guy with that skill set to that money for an offense that can't move the football, and he doesn't play.
Yeah, it's brutal. It's brutal.
Something was going on.
F.
I don't know if it had to do with Douglas. I don't know if it had to do with Saleh. I don't know if it had to do with teammates. For some reason, something happened that went right off the rails from day one. And that's that. This tracker is not up to date because it doesn't include Quentin Jefferson, Al Woods. You said interior guys.
Yeah, B plus. Yeah, those were great.
They were fantastic. Jefferson gets hurt late. Woods gets hurt early. And this is the catastrophe of Joe Douglas's tenure is the injuries. Chuck Clark. The Jets go out and trade for literally an Iron Man. 1,500 consecutive snaps without missing. Gone. Hurt. And I tweeted this out a couple weeks ago, Chris. If you look at the linemen he's drafted since getting here. Cam Clark. Never played an NFL game because he breaks his neck in practice.
I saw this tweet. Yeah, you were very popular in Jets subreddit
for games played in college, including 30 in a row at one point. Breaks his neck. Elijah Vera Tucker missed 1 or 2 games in college. Misses 2 half seasons. Mekhi Becton missed a few snaps in college. Misses 2 full seasons. Like, I laugh now, and I get it because it's something I normally say. But the number of people I've seen say, we got to draft some durable linemen who don't get hurt. Oh, you mean like the 3 he did who all they did was get hurt? Like, it's so impossible to predict. And that's why, like, I look at the Joe Douglas thing. Like I said, to me, the biggest thing is the injuries. I look at it like if I own a business and I hire a janitor and he's got that place, spick and span, clean, ready to roll the next morning, and someone drives by in the middle of the night while that janitor is asleep and throws a brick through the window, am I going to fire that dude when I show up to work and I'm like, this place is a mess? Well, yeah, but I did my part and then I was asleep and someone smashed the window. You got to go, man. You get out of here. This is terrible. Like, there's so much stuff that's happened that's out of his control that, for me personally, I think it's silly to hold him accountable. He can't build a line. Like, look at pre-injury Mekhi Becton and what everybody was saying about him. Like, rave reviews from critics, from fans, from, pundits. I mean, Brian Baldinger was going to open up a special wing of the Hall of Fame for the guy. And then, of course, you get AVT. And if you had Tippmann, AVT, Becton, I've said all this stuff. But sticking to this year, free agency for Joe Douglas, a lot of misses.
D.
But some hits.
D. I'll give him a D because of the guys on the interior. And listen, I don't think it can get any worse than what ended up being put together in the offseason of 2023. But this is the most important offseason, I think, in my lifetime as a Jets fan. And I'm going to turn 30 this year. And so I didn't obviously have not been watching Jets football for 30 years, even though I'm going to be 30. But since I've been old enough to understand what's going on a football field, this is probably the most important offseason of my lifetime. And they're limited in the amount of resources they have. And so if Joe Douglas wants to be considered this elite GM and he wants to be given an opportunity to make another quarterback selection and be the long-term GM here in New York. Well, guess what, Joe? You got to show your GM chops this offseason. I got to see some shrewd moves. I got to see you going out and getting some big-time talent. I got to see the bigger picture of what they're doing with this offensive line. And look, they've got too many needs. They're not going to be able to address them all via free agency, and they're not going to be able to address them all via the draft. It is going to be a blend of mixing those two areas together, and I think you'll see some trades in there as well. This team has 1.5 starting offensive linemen as we sit here on January 10th. 1.5. They need to go out and get at least 2 starting tackles. They have to get some interior guard depth for Elijah Vera Tucker. They probably need another starting guard. They need 2 wide receivers. They probably need a safety because I don't think Jordan Whitehead's coming back. They need another corner for some depth. They need some players on the interior. I can go on and on about the things that this team needs. All right, Joe, here you go. Here's your offseason to do.
I don't know if you caught this little piece of news, Chris.
Okay. Nick Saban retiring? Is that what?
I tend to avoid this silly stuff, but when people I think some people just misunderstand or they read the wrong source or whatever, or they're just being obtuse, to quote Andy Dufresne of Shawshank Redemption. When the Roger, did you see the thing with McAfee? He's off McAfee now.
I saw that he's no longer on Pat McAfee. Yes.
Yeah. So we're not going to get into the weeds on that, but Rogers makes these comments about we got to clean up and stick to football and blah blah blah. And right away, even Jets fans, critics, oh, look at this hypocrite. He said, let's worry about football. And then he goes on McAfee to talk about this. The season's over. He's not getting ready for a game. And he said, if you listen to the quote, when we get back in this building next year, everything, all the bullshit stuff needs to go. All the non-football related stuff. He's saying, like, we need to refocus for when the year starts. And all these people, some of them, like, media people who you would think have brains, and they're like, oh, look at this guy. Earlier in the day, he's saying we got to focus on football, and now he's going on McAfee to talk about, Jimmy Kimmel. And I'm like, but he didn't. The year, it's over. The season ended 2 days ago. Really, it ended 2.5 months ago. But did you think Aaron Rodgers meant nobody should talk about anything other than football for the next 7 months? No, he said, when we get back here, we got to have our house in order, which has nothing to do with him going on a show where I'm kind of glad he won't be going on now. The McAfee thing, yeah, it's sophomoric, but I get a couple laughs when I watch it. It's not I've seen a lot worse, productions in on sports television nowadays, but I don't know if you heard any thoughts on no more Rodgers on McAfee.
Yeah, look, I'm not gonna litigate here on this show the Rodgers, Jimmy Kimmel, COVID, Epstein list. I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it here on this show. I'm not litigating it. I'm just not doing it. What Rodgers?
Like I said, we're not getting in the weeds on it.
I'm not doing it. I'm just not going to be me. I have my thoughts on it, but I'm just not going to do that here on this show. When it comes to going on McAfee in general, I don't have a problem with it. I don't think it's a distraction. I don't think it's a big deal, especially when most of the time he stays away from the controversy like he did with the COVID and the Jimmy Kimmel stuff, right? Most of the time it's Aaron Rodgers book club. He talks about football. It normally stays in an area where it's okay, but sometimes it goes off the rails, and the Jets have to deal with the repercussions of that. Where I have a problem with it, and to your point, Glenn, he's not going to go on the rest of the season. He's been canceled for the remainder of, I guess, the summer. His comments about leaving the BS aside and we need to focus on things that help us win. We need to focus on winning and block out everything else. I will have a problem if when the season starts back up, he goes on McAfee. Then I will have a problem with it because then he's being hypocritical. Then he is saying one thing and doing another. Right now, I don't care. But if you are going to come out and say we need to block out all the BS and we need all the stuff that has nothing to do with winning, we need to put to the side, going on Pat McAfee has nothing to do with winning. So if when the season begins, we got Aaron Rodgers Tuesdays with Pat McAfee and the Jets are playing meaningful football games, and I have to worry about Aaron Rodgers going on a rant about Anthony Fauci and COVID and Jeffrey Epstein and Jimmy Kimmel, if I have to worry about that stuff and then Robert Saleh being asked about it and it being just a complete distraction all week long, yeah, I'm going to have a problem with that. That's when it will reach a point for me where Rodgers is being a hypocrite and I'd be over it.
Yeah, with me, I think it's it'll if he's going on McAfee, I can live with it if they agree that like let's just keep it light and fun and we're not going to do anything controversial. Because I wouldn't have any problem with any other player doing an interview during the season and having a little fun. That's not, but yeah, keep stuff that's going to bleed into the building and lead to questions from the media. Maybe because then maybe they start asking your teammates, "What do you think about what Aaron said about this?" and da da da, and then it becomes a distraction.
Mhm.
So yeah, keep the hot button stuff off the table during the season. But yeah, my only point was the number of people that were insisting. Rogers said, nobody should say anything for the next 7 months till the season starts. He specifically said when we get back here next year. Um, and speaking of when they get back here next year, let's see, Rogers. Da, da, da. Let's talk. We've talked a lot, and not we won't do specific names today. But let's take a few minutes here and talk about some of these answers people won't like. But you're the New York Jets. Let's say they make a trade, they end up with a second round pick. What positions are you targeting outside of round? Everyone's saying tackle and receiver, round one. Um, what are you doing in round two? To me, people don't want to hear D line, but you want to take Devondre Sweat in the second round and get a run stopper in the middle who can collapse the pocket? Sign me up.
Yeah. Yeah.
You want to get you want to get Jaden Hicks or safety, little in the mid rounds, maybe Bo Braid later in the draft, something like that. I'm happy with that too. It's got to be heavy offense, but you're taking a couple defensive players.
Yeah, this team needs help. Interior of their defensive line. Once again, they tried to fill that with free agency dollars this past year, and it's the couple of moves that we actually liked in the conversation that we just had. But they would like some long-term, cost-controlled, younger options at that position. So you look for that probably on day two if they're able to somehow get a second-round pick. I certainly would not rule out the idea of getting another edge rusher. They love to do this. They love to build depth, and so if they have a second-round pick or even with their third-round pick, I'm sure they would revisit the idea of getting an edge rusher. They need a safety as well. And listen, I'll say it. This is fine. I'll be the guy. Day two, if they have a second round pick, even with their third round pick, they need to be looking at getting a guy who can throw the ball after Aaron Rodgers is gone. Quarterback absolutely needs to be on their list of draft needs outside of round one.
Now, we've talked about our fandom for Cam Ward and how much we love him.
Yeah.
Who do you like round three? Like I look at a guy like Sam Hartman, like Brady Cook, these guys who can be projects. They show some things. Cook runs really well. Showed that against Ohio State. He showed that throughout the year. Did make some bad mistakes, some pretty ugly interceptions during the season, but he was such an improved guy in college from one year to the next. It's like, is he starting to grow now? But are there any day three quarterback types you look at that you look at and you like as of right now?
Day three, interesting. Hartman's an interesting one. I think he's a gamer, right? I don't think he does anything exceptionally well. I don't think he has like an above average trait that you go, wow, he does X really well. Like he's got really great arm strength, or like he doesn't have that kind of trait. But the thing I like about him is he's a gamer. This dude battles. And sometimes you just need a guy that's going to battle. And I'll give you an example. And I'm not comparing them as prospects, but just the Baker Mayfield's a battler. He just goes out there, he gets knocked around, he gets back up, he goes, all right, what's the next play? Like Will Levis, dude gets knocked around in Tennessee, just keeps getting back up when he's allowed to play, and he slings it. He's a tough SOB, right? That's the kind of guy that I would like to take a flyer on day three. I'll give you a name, maybe not day three, maybe day two. Personal brand guy for me, I think he's going to be. Michael Pratt out of Tulane, I think is going to be a guy that I'm going to be like, this is the guy the Jets should take on day two of the draft. I think so. Yeah, I think that's going to be the guy.
I've only watched one of his games, but he's sort of on my list of guys that I've heard enough about that I want to watch him. The game I did watch, I liked. But I've really sort of now that the season's over, really a few weeks ago, I started diving in more on the prospects. I was up to like 5 a.m., watched 3 or 4 games last night. Looking mostly at safeties, but I looked a little bit at I watched Oregon State, of course. Watched Penn State. I want to get the damn. For some reason, I'm not seeing as many games on YouTube as we have in years past. Like the YouTube community's got to pick it up.
Yeah.
Because I want to watch that Mizzou Ohio State game. I want to watch Javon Foster in that game. Because I look at him as like day 3 tackle, tons of experience, major program, winning program. Like that's the guy you can grab. I probably watched 4 or 5 Mizzou games, really liked him. Looked at his PFF grades, really solid. Probably like mid 70s kind of across the board. Yeah, Javon Foster, and I'm every day I'm waiting for someone to post that damn game, or Caddy's got to get it up there. I think I messaged Caddy to
You're like,
see if he
dude.
can get that game up there because I want to see. They added him to the Senior Bowl roster the other day. Javon Foster, he accepted, so I was pumped about that. Jaden Hicks going, a few Washington State guys I really liked. Brendan Jackson's going. Shal Smith Wade is going. So some good representation there. It was Dayan Henley. Because of Dayan Henley, I watched so much Washington State last year. I'm like, man, they got some ballers. And so I watched those guys this year. They looked fantastic. So looking to see those guys. And real quick before we go, we'll wrap it up, Chris. In terms of draft picks, I've talked about the possibility do you tag and trade Huff. They don't have enough picks. They're projected to get 3 comp picks, a 6 and 2 7s. But as you look at this roster, aside from Bryce Huff, is there anyone you look at that you think this guy might have enough value that you can send him elsewhere for a pick? Be it a 5, a 4, whatever it may be. Like, who do you look at on this roster and think good player who you can afford to give up and maybe get yourself a mid-rounder?
Yeah. So you added the disclaimer of you can afford to give up, because I'm still worried. I talked about the cold sweats that Joe Douglas's draft approach this year gives me. There are some cold sweats about whether or not Garrett Wilson is going to ask out of this organization and want to be playing elsewhere next season. Charles says trade Lazard. I don't know what you're getting for him at this point. If you can get anything, probably. Maybe Zach gets you something like in the 5th, 6th, or 7th. You probably get a late day 3 pick if you move him. It's probably got some conditions attached to it or whatever. It's probably got a pick swap or something. Huff is a tag and trade candidate for sure. I really don't think they're going to work out a long-term deal, even though they should. I think that's their ticket to getting a 2nd round pick. Trying to think of maybe one of the tight ends they try to move potentially, and then maybe try to give Ruckert more playing time.
Yeah.
That's potentially one of the answers.
I would think only Conklin would have any value. I mean, who's trading for Uzama,
Fair. I don't know specifically the cap hits and the contract numbers for them, so that would probably allow me to discern who's more movable and who might be more palatable to another team. But that's probably the area of depth that you can deal with. It's tough. They don't have a ton of areas.
What about John Franklin Myers?
Everything about the way Robert Saleh and Jeff Ulbrich coach this team tell me that they want the most amount of depth possible. And if I just said in one sentence that they're going to tag and trade Aubrey Huff, because I don't think they're going to work out a long-term deal.
Aubrey Huff. I don't think Aubrey Huff's going anywhere.
Sorry, that's the baseball brain in me.
I had him on my fantasy team like a couple years in a row. I lived just south of Tampa, so I saw a lot of Aubrey Huff.
I'm in baseball mode in my head, right? Because I was doing a bunch of baseball stuff for the radio show today.
Yep.
Bryce Huff. If Bryce Huff gets tagged and traded, they're going to need somebody to replace those snaps, and you would think Will McDonald will get more. Jermaine Johnson, they still got JFM. Like, they're going to need those guys. So I think they're not going to move too many of them. It'll be really, really interesting to me to see what they do, but they don't have a ton of positions where I think they're just fluid with depth that they can just move from.
That's the thing. I think their most valuable assets outside of Huff is the next year's picks. So we'll see what happens there.
Don't. That's you're gonna end the show. You're gonna start talking about moving 2025 draft selections.
Got to do it. Got to recoup that 2nd rounder. And that's the other thing. The Aaron Rodgers trade. It's like that thing ain't done yet. There's still going to be costs involved because Joe Douglas sitting there going, I gave up that 2 for Aaron. Now I need that 2 back. Who am I going to give up to get that Aaron pick back? And someone else is going to end up going. But it is a good question. The one of the more intriguing things will be Zach, because Joe Douglas in his couple big trades, Darnold, Jamal, he got way more than anybody anticipated. Way more. So I'm hoping he pulls off a 4 for Zach. If he does, I think that would be a huge win. That was the killer with Zach getting the concussion. The way Zach played in his last game, if he'd played like that the next 2-3 weeks, you could be talking about getting a couple picks for him. But he didn't. He gets the concussion, misses the final few games. No one's giving you multiple picks for a guy who had one strong game at the end of the year. But again, can't catch a damn break. That'll wrap this one up for us, Jets fans. Thanks for checking us out, tuning in, taking part in the chat. Joe Douglas, bad year for him. Bad year for Joe. Maybe difference. I think definitely a different story if the coaches took a different approach, and definitely a different story if some guys had stayed on the field, but they didn't, so he didn't. That'll do it for this one, Jets fans. Have a good one.